After media reports that Robert Mueller had asked for a high-stakes interview, President Trump unexpectedly told reporters, well, he's looking forward to it.
Do you think Robert Mueller will be fair to you in this larger investigation? We're going to find out. Are you concerned about it? Here's what we'll say, and everybody says, no collusion. There's no collusion. Now they're saying, oh, well, did he fight back? But what fight back. What is collusion? Sir, fight back. John, fight back. Oh, it's obstruction. So here's the thing. I hope so.
And when he was asked at the Davos conference about the New York Times report on his having tried to fire Mueller last June.
Why did you want to fire Robert Mueller?
Fake news, folks. Fake news.
What's your message?
Typical New York Times fake stories.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor. Shelby Holliday, senior video reporter for The Wall Street Journal. And Capri Cafaro, a Washington Examiner contributor and former Democratic state senator in Ohio. Molly, the New York Times report has been confirmed by The Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, NBC, CNN, Fox News, and others. That doesn't sound like fake news.
Well, you have, it's difficult to say confirmed when you're talking about anonymous sources, which is what we always rely on here. But you have anonymous sources saying that Donald Trump thought about firing someone or wanted to fire someone who he's legally allowed to fire, but he didn't fire. And this is a story that was reported in June, in September, in December. So why is this big breaking news that we're reporting it yet again? I get the feeling people are forgetting that this was already reported before.
Well, because of the fresh news, if you believe the sources quoted by all these organizations, that Don McGahn, the White House counsel, said, I'm resigning if you go through with this plan.
Okay, so again, he didn't fire someone who he's legally allowed to fire. Right. And this is treated as big news. And I think we need to take a step back and look at why it's being treated as big news. You have the House Intelligence Committee prepared to release a report about FISA and surveillance abuse at the Department of Justice and FBI that members of Congress say is chilling, criminal, really disturbing. And you also have no evidence of collusion with Russia, between the Trump administration and Russia, after a year of being told that this is what it's all about. I think what you're seeing in official D.C. is a bit of panic and fear about the lack of substance to the Russia investigation and worry about what's going to come out of this report.
But Capri, since President Trump denied last summer that he was even thinking about firing Robert Mueller, and his pal Chris Ruddy of Newsmax went on PBS at the time and said it was under consideration. Right. So some journalists, some liberal commentators are now saying he was not telling the truth at the time.
Well, I mean, obviously, it seems that President Trump and some of his closest allies are maybe saying one thing and then saying another thing. That's certainly not, I think, unique. We've seen President Trump change his mind and change stories, time and again. I do think, though, that what is happening, not so much, I disagree a little bit as far as the media utilizing this, bringing this story up again to deflect from something else, but rather I do think that there is a concerted effort to create a narrative across, different media channels, essentially to say that this is a pattern. This is a pattern that President Trump wanted to, fire Mueller. No, he didn't. But, and the reason why he didn't is because Don McGahn said he was going to quit. We saw the same thing with the FBI director reportedly saying, and there was coverage all around that, saying he was going to quit if he was, further, with McCabe.
Let me jump in and get Shelby. So the New York Times said its story was based on 4 unnamed officials. The White House didn't deny it. Don McGahn, the counsel, didn't deny it. The president's lawyer, Ty Cobb, said he wasn't going to comment on it. That's not what we in the business call a hard knockdown.
No, it's not a hard knockdown at all. And that's part of the reason this story was such a big bombshell. You cannot deny that this was significant news. As Capri was saying, it's all about patterns. If you talk to legal experts, they say patterns are everything for prosecutors. And so this is just evidence of another attempt by President Trump to knock down the special counsel, to knock down the investigation. He did not take that step, and so it is worth noting that. But patterns are big. From a media perspective, this was big news, not just because of the legal aspect. There are parallels to Watergate, but also because the president has been denying this. His team has been denying this.
But Molly, you say
months.
It's not that big a deal because parts of it have been reported before and it's unnamed sources, and he didn't fire Robert Mueller. But would you agree that if he had, a month after firing Comey, this would have been a political and legal firestorm that would have just absolutely rocked this city?
Well, I guess I'm more interested, again, in the media takes here. And for a year, we've had the media monomaniacally claiming that there's collusion between Trump and Russia. We have no evidence of that.
We have 2 people who have lied to the FBI about their contacts with
we
Russia.
have no evidence.
So there is evidence.
There is evidence. We have no evidence of treasonous collusion with Trump to steal an election, which is what these stories have said nonstop, day in and day out for a year. Now we have news that the Mueller probe is they leak pretty regularly. They're not leaking anything about Russia collusion. They're leaking about obstruction. And the media are just taking that and running with it as if they are the dutiful servants of the Mueller probe, instead of thinking about how the story that they've been pitching for a year is.
Well, and I think that, the big problem, frankly, is that, we're litigating this issue in the court of public opinion. The media is not doing a service, in my opinion, to this investigation because they continue to stir the pot. We need to if they really care about the outcome of this investigation, they need to let it take its course and not continue to rip it apart.
We live in a 24/7 media world where everybody has to analyze everything. And look, the president doesn't have many defenders on this particular story, but it is true, despite all the headlines and all the cable news segments, you can't build an obstruction case by pointing to a firing that never happened.
Right, exactly.
Talk about intent, but that's
well, you also can't really build a great obstruction case if there is not. Well, you can, but the bar is very high. There has to be an underlying crime, a lot of legal experts say.
All right, I want to get away from the legal analysis. What about Molly's point that after a year and all these investigations and all these Hill committees, that there is no hard evidence of collusion with Russia, and therefore the media have moved the goalposts and are now saying, well, but he possibly obstructed, the president did, or he's acting like he has something to hide.
I'm not sure the goalposts have changed from the beginning. Since the president fired Comey, there have been two prongs of this investigation: obstruction of justice and collusion. Neither of those
Would you say the emphasis
have been
has
concluded.
Changed? Would you
the
say
emphasis in the coverage
lately,
has
yes,
changed.
it has
the emphasis
changed.
in the coverage has changed.
But collusion is actually not a crime. Treason does not apply.
But collusion has been the subject of millions and millions and millions of words by news organizations.
And also, the entire probe is the result of a campaign to claim treasonous collusion with Russia to steal an election, and claims that were made by intelligence and law enforcement agencies that are now under scrutiny after a year of congressional investigation. And we have reports coming out alleging serious wrongdoing by federal employees as it relates to this.
Well,
and those folks have been removed.
Let me ask you this, Molly, because now we have, here's something Sean Hannity said the other night, talking about Justice Department and FBI. People must be held accountable, investigated, indicted, probably many of them thrown in jail. So Fox has come under attack regularly by some at MSNBC for beating up on the FBI, Justice Department, deep state. Now, it's not Fox News. It is certain commentators at Fox News, Lou Dobbs, we showed earlier, Sean Hannity, Judge Dean, others, people who are paid for their opinions. Nevertheless, does some of this go too far?
I think the narrative that if you are critiquing certain bad actions by certain people in the leadership of certain agencies, that you are therefore tarnishing everybody in the agency, that's a straw man argument. And it also indicates, again, that people don't want to deal with the very real issue that congressional committees are coming out with reports alleging serious wrongdoing by federal agencies. That is their constitutional duty.
Committees or Devin Nunes?
Well, but I do think, though, that, this issue of the text messages between the two, star-crossed lovers at the FBI going back and forth has gotten extensive coverage.
We're going to talk about that later. So let me flip Molly's argument and see what you think. The people who are ripping, the commentators, including some at this network, who are ripping the FBI and Justice Department, they say they're holding the Bureau accountable. They're liberal detractors, people on your side, saying, well, no, they're just trying to discredit the Trump investigation.
I think there's a valid argument to be made on both sides. I think that certainly, as you mentioned, Howard, these folks are entitled to their opinion, even though they are part of a news organization. There is some editorial license that they can take. But I do think that there's something to be said to potentially speculate that, if you undermine those that are investigating, and you say that they are not credible, therefore that investigation becomes uncredible because those people are no longer trustworthy.
Speculation is something I try to avoid, but certainly a lot of Democrats during the Bill Clinton impeachment that tried to discredit Ken Starr. But Shelby, even some conservatives, like former Fox News contributor Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard, say Fox opinion people are going too far. But then you have to factor in that people like Kristol despise Donald Trump and have since the campaign.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with this being a 24/7 news cycle. There is this obsession with instant gratification. Everyone wants to know everything immediately. We don't have all the facts. We don't have all the texts. We don't know what's in Devin Nunes' memo. So to light some partisan charcoals on fire and make it this massive wildfire before we even know all of the facts is irresponsible. It does undermine
the idea that after a year,
democratic institutions.
The idea that after a year of running story after story based on nothing but anonymous sources, and now you have an actual committee putting its name behind its hundreds of hours
fair to
of
question
testimony,
conduct at the
thousands
FBI.
of documents they've reviewed, now say, oh, that's not enough substantiation after running wild with
anonymous
sources.
in general.
Is unbelievable.